It's been 2 weeks since we had a new customer for Atlist. We usually get a few every week, so this is kind of a dry spell. I find myself constantly checking Stripe for new subscribers. I'll check when I'm watching TV,
That is correct. I do not watch the show.
when I'm walking up the stairs, or just while I'm working. It's gotta be like 50 times a day. It's a bad habit. If I have a second, I just flick open Stripe and see what's up. So we're a year into building Atlist, and we've put in a lot of work, especially my co-founder Karl, who works on it full-time and covers the entire stack. And we're definitely not failing, but we're also not hitting our expectations, and that can be stressful. So we decided to have a conversation about it, just to talk about how it felt. Basically, I wanted to discuss, we're in like a funny state. We're not like failing or anything like that, but I don't know if we're like hitting our expectations for growth. And it's worth pointing out, we plucked these expectations out of thin air. We're not doing terrible. We have paying customers that we're really grateful for, and our monthly recurring revenue is going up, but it's still lower than what we had hoped for. And it can feel stressful to feel like you missed expectations. For example, it turns out Karl was doing the same obsessive Stripe checking that I was doing.
I'm constantly looking at the user signups and just, I'm always discouraged when it's one or two a day.
And we both were dealing with negative self-talk. I think the negative self-talk is interesting because I think it's like when things don't hit expectations, it's like easy to blame yourself probably. Like Atlist would be successful if there was better marketing, if we had more people coming in, or like somehow the fact that this hasn't lived up to my expectation is like a reflection of me as a marketer, or me as a product designer, or maybe even me as a human being. Like my worth is tied to the success of Atlist. On top of all of this, we also have to worry about the other guy. What if he quits? Is this worthy of his time? What if he gets a better opportunity? I feel like neither of us have any interest in quitting the startup. But I think that is like kind of sometimes in the back of your mind where you're like, what if Karl gets like a really great opportunity from something? I feel like that's one of the things that like occasionally one of the thoughts that will pop into my head. Do you ever get that?
Yes, more than I care to admit. Like there's always the other little devils, talking in your ear about what if Steve gets bored, or we're not hitting the goals that we set out for ourselves, or all those types of things too. So
there's a word that Silicon Valley startups often use for the feeling that we're describing. The word that came to mind was like the Trough of Sorrow. Have you heard Paul Graham talk about that?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, it is like, this is whatever, the Trough of Sorrow that everybody talks about, where it's like the excitement of launch is off and now the hard work is settled in. You can think of this like a graph of emotions. Every startup begins with a burst of enthusiasm and energy. But that initial burst is like a sugar high, and you'll often crash into the Trough of Sorrow, which is where things get hard. Eventually, if things work well, you hit the wiggles, and then if things go really well, eventually you hit the promised land.
The wiggles, I think, is where we're at. At least that's where I feel.
Like you get little tugs on your fishing rod where it's like, oh shit, they're biting. I haven't caught it.
Yeah, they're definitely biting. Like last time I checked, we're in the, I think we're approaching 2,000 signups. Like there's been 2,000 instances, and I don't know, I think like 100 people who actively come back and update their maps and stuff. So there is reason to be optimistic. We may well be on our way to the promised land. And there's something encouraging about that. It feels good to believe that you're on the way, because otherwise you live moment to moment. Whatever happened yesterday feels like a statement or indictment about the future of Atlist. A couple of days after our conversation, Karl told me about this habit that he's developed. Whenever he feels himself getting caught up in the detailed day-to-day graphs in Stripe, he zooms out or switches to an entirely different graph that shows how momentum is building in the long term. It's a way to reassure that you're on the way to somewhere. I thought that was a wise thing to do, and it's a habit I'm going to try to implement for myself. Thanks for watching.